hi there, ho there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are coming at us from across the world. So great to see you all. Welcome back to the Drones at Dawn podcast. We are knee deep in our global drone regulations month, and we've taken a tour of Canada and Europe, and now we turn to Africa, and with an emphasis on South Africa. And no better person to speak with us about that than Kim James from UAV Aerial, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and her company here in a second. But I just want to remind everybody, this is a live stream, so please jump in the chat, ask your questions, give us your positive encouragement. We absolutely love that. So let's go ahead and jump in. And good afternoon for you, right, Kim?
Hi, good afternoon from me and good morning to you.
And so Kim is coming to us live from South Africa. That's the beauty of this digital world we live in. We can have these conversations across the globe. And Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Dawn, and thank you so much for having me on here. We've chatted recently on another platform, so it's so good to be here again. So I'm a director of a commercial drone operator here in South Africa. So I'm part of our post holder group, and that means that regulatorily I'm responsible for safety and security for our company. And came into this drone industry a few years ago, having done something completely different for almost 25 years, and absolutely loving this world that we find ourselves in, which is ever changing and innovative and cutting edge. And so as a drone operator, we operate in the survey and inspection field. We do inspections for insurance companies, post or pre and post loss. And we also have a drone security company called Drone Guards. So my day every day is different and loving every second of it.
Yeah, and so just for everybody out there, so her company is called UAV Aerial Works. And Kim, I'm going to go off script already, so you're just going to have to bear with me today. I'm highly medicated. I've got some cold, and I'm already on like Dayquil or whatever it's called. So did I not just see you getting recognized for something, some kind of, maybe it was with your drone security company? Can you just brag on yourself for a minute? Because I know I remembered seeing something on LinkedIn about this.
Oh, so there's an awards program called Airwords, and apparently I've been nominated for a People's Choice Award. I'm not very humbled, and really there are so many deserving people in this industry, and particularly in Africa for sure. So we've done what we need to do in our company, but personally, what speaks to my soul is sharing what we do and educating, and I just speak from the heart, and if I can share something that someone can learn from, that's great. I sit on a couple of excos. So I sit on Kawasa, which is our commercial unmanned aircraft association of Southern Africa, and also on the Drone Council of South Africa, which was formed last year. And of course, very much part of Louise Jupp and Sharon Rosmark's Women in Drones Africa chapter. And so, just being part of that means that, I guess people have seen what I talk about, and maybe that's where the nomination came from, but very, very chuffed about that. So, but I share that with everybody because there's just so many people that do good work here.
Well, you're so humble. And, we had Richard Nichols on from Airwords as one of our first guests in February, and talked about that program that was kicking off this year. And yeah, so that's where I did see you on LinkedIn talking about that. And so what an honor. People's Choice, everybody. That's just people out there that are looking around and nominate you for just what they see you doing. And so the fact that Kim has been nominated for that is pretty amazing. We're going to talk about women in drones here shortly. I want to jump into the regs. And oh, by the way, Sharon Rossmark is out there, CEO of Women in Drones. If you didn't see her comment, Kim, she says, "Yay, Dawn and Kim, looking forward to your session."
Oh, brilliant. There you
Yeah.
go. Shout out to Sharon.
Yeah, and so when Kim talked earlier about a program I was on, it was actually the Women in Drones Africa Fireside Chat, and I had that opportunity to speak about the Women to Watch Global Awards program this year for Women in Drones. It's our 5th anniversary. We just closed out our nominations period on Friday, and excited to see the flurry of activity, especially like at the very 11th hour there. So we've got a solid showing, and just can't wait to see who those women and teams are that come forward. But got a couple people out there, Naveen Kumar saying hello, everyone. And I see someone else here saying, go Kim, go Dawn. So thank you guys and
Oh, I
gals.
love it. Hi, everybody.
That's awesome. So let's talk about the regulations. So you're in South Africa, and just to be clear, right? So everybody out there, if you're not on Clubhouse, you can be now, because guess what? They just opened it to Android users.
Oh,
So
great. Perfect.
yeah, if you want a direct invite, IM me your phone number. I have like a handful of invites I can get people in, so you don't have to go on a waiting list. But last Thursday we had Sinette Koch from your colleague on there, as well as Denise Susilo. Denise was a Woman to Watch Award recipient for leadership for last year, 2020. And Denise is highly involved also in the African Drone Forum. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But what an incredible conversation on Clubhouse we had about these regulations, and just everybody out there, to be clear, I mean, we're talking the largest continent on the planet, okay? The big continent is what they call it. And so, the diversity and the number of countries that comprise the African Union is just amazing. And I think, when people think about Africa, they're just seeing snippets of things in the news, and they're all good. Mostly, when you're talking about commercial drones, you're seeing Zipline with their drone deliveries. You're seeing, I think, COVID tests and blood, like a lot of healthcare and medical deliveries happening across the continent. But perhaps that's a little misleading. So let's kind of nick down for a second, Kim, and talk specifically about South Africa, where you're from. And I understand your country was one of the first to actually create a drone regulation. So was that in 2005 or 2015? I don't recall. I feel like it was 2015.
2015, yeah. So
yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so you're right, Dawn. South Africa was one of the first countries to roll out or promulgate the kind of the drone regulations, and in the form of what we call Part 101. So we're in our 6th year, and South Africa chose the certification model, which basically means that whether we operate a 250-gram drone or a 25-kilogram drone, we have to abide by the same regulations. So, the process is cumbersome, because every individual or organization who wants to operate a drone commercially, and that basically means for gain, interest, or profit. And Part 101 also includes hobbyists. So, essentially, a hobbyist would be able to operate their drone that they can buy in a toy store in their back garden. That's essentially how restricted that is. And everyone else who does anything with the drone that's now deemed commercial has to apply for the following. And so you have to get an air services license from the Department of Transport, the Air Services License Council. Some of these processes can run in parallel. And then the RPAS operator's certificate from the Civil Aviation Authority. All your pilots have to be certified as a remote pilot. And then the aircraft, any drone in your fleet, has to be registered on that ROC's operation specification, and you have to operate with third-party liability insurance.
So those are pretty stringent requirements, as you say. It's one thing to be operating what we call in the United States like a Part 135 drone airline. But it's another thing to be like almost a mom and pop drone service provider that's maybe doing aerial photography for real estate, or even just as an artist, or working with Hollywood or the media. So is anybody looking in the country at maybe modifying that? Because before I even get to that question, Kim, let me back up for a second. I believe you mentioned on LinkedIn you were kind of celebrating the fact that you just passed your annual audit. So not only do you have to do all of these things up front, but it sounds then like the regulatory folks come in and do a deep dive in your paperwork to make sure you're actually complying every single year.
Yeah, so when you get that ROC, as we call it, and your operation specification, which basically gives you the right to operate, how you have applied and intend to operate. So if you've applied for beyond visual line of sight, operating above 400 foot, operating at night, operating in controlled airspace with the following fleet, then that's what you are allowed to do. And you have the privilege of that for a year. And in between that, actually, the CAA has the right to come and do kind of drop-in audits at any time. So at your base of operations, which has to be registered. So that address has to be registered with the CAA, and they can come in there at any time at the drop of a hat and inspect. But the latest would be annually. And so every ROC has an ops manual, and that manual is basically the translation of every regulation in Part 101, which it's basically a translation of how we are going to apply Part 101. And they come and check whether your operations are reflective of what you've said you're going to be doing in your ops manual. And they dig into everything, every flight folio, every incident, your safety management system, management meetings, safety reviews, security reviews, quality audits, everything. And then if they're happy with that, then they give you another year to operate.
Wow. That seems really intense and very akin to what you would expect for manned aircraft. And you mentioned safety management system. For those out there that missed our previous podcast with Major General retired Fred Rogero, he talked all about SMS and his company Resilient Solutions. And there's also a Drone Life article about that. So, if you want to know more about SMS and what that means and the importance of that and the fact that South Africa has incorporated that as part of their process directly, that's pretty incredible. So I guess the upside, Kim, is that, like you said, once you say, hey, I want to do beyond visual line of sight, I want to do it with this fleet, you're good to go for that entire year. And then if you're just basically keeping the paperwork up and doing the right thing, which hopefully everybody is, then you're getting that check mark and getting to do it again the following year. So that's a significant difference between what we're doing here in the United States, which is very much like exception, with waivers and things like that for BV loss. In fact, a lot of our research and development is on BV loss. So what about operations over people and at night? You probably know, Kim, that we in the United States just published our rule early this year officially, just kind of pieces and parts of those, and it's complex. I'm not going to get into it. Lots of articles that I've written on my website, if anybody wants to look at those, about those things. But how does that work? Is that the same when you get your ROC, as you call it, your RPAS operator certificate, if you say I want to operate at night? So I guess it behooves you as a company to like throw in the kitchen sink and say, I want to be able to virtually do everything. And here's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it with this fleet. And then you're good to go pretty much for a year.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything in the regulations state that it's not allowed to fly over people, property, and public roads unless the director approves it. And the director meaning the head of the CAA. So what that means is on our ops spec, it would say operations allowed at night and over people, property, and public roads. But then what you'd have to do is say, okay, if, for example, that operation is in controlled airspace, we're approved to do that. But now you need to make sure that you request a flexible use of airspace. So there's a process that every time we are operating, we need to get landowner permission. That's the easiest part, unless it's a municipal road that we need to fly over, for example. But it's all about safety and privacy, right? And so if it's operations at night, then all the safety protocols come into play. And it's all around how you've mitigated that with the SACAA when you first said you're going to do it. So if you have your people in place and your protocols and your standard operating procedures in place, then you're allowed to do that.
So you just said something that made me smile. You talked about getting approvals from property owners before you fly over their property, unless it's a public or municipal road, street or road. I smile and laugh because in this country, we're having a great debate over what we're calling aviation rights. This idea of aviation and navigation, and where does private property kind of begin and end when it comes to the air, and our Federal Aviation Administration's jurisdiction. Same thing, you know, they're saying we govern down to the lowest blade of grass, and that's the federal side, and the states are saying, well, hold on a minute, we have police power, we are in charge of the welfare of our citizens in our state, and so things like privacy and criminal law and property rights are generally in our Constitution relegated to the states to govern. So it's interesting that we're having this debate, and it's very interesting to me that South Africa has already basically said that privacy rights actually apply, and before you fly over someone's property, you have to get permission. So do you actually have to buy easements then from people for the air rights to fly over their property? Or as a practical matter, how do you, like Kim, with your company, you like knock on doors, or what do you do exactly to get that permission?
Yeah, so it's such an interesting question. So in our normal operations around surveys and inspections, it would ordinarily be over a industrial site or some form of factory or mine or whatever. And then you would have the head of safety or the CEO or whoever's in charge of making head of facilities, they would normally sign that off. When we're doing security, this is where that comes in, right? Because now it's over residential estates. Right. And in South Africa, we have a strange kind of setup where we have a lot of what you guys, you know, outside of South Africa would know as gated communities. And they normally run some form of homeowners association. So it's a managed community. And there we have a really strict kind of protocol around communication. We have an FAQ document, and any of those communication channels that homeowners association would use to manage their residents would be used to communicate, you know, there's a drone program, it's for your own security, this is how we're going to operate. And it's really around putting people's mind at rest. Initially, some person will always come up and say, I don't want you to spying in my window. And then we'd say, we're not going to fly over your house. We're going to normally fly the perimeter. And it's about allaying those fears. So that's normally no problem. And then that head of the homeowners association gives approval. Where it's unmanaged. Sorry, go ahead.
Do they charge you money to do that? In other words,
no,
you're not paying
like
essentially a lease for air rights to do these.
No, because so the permission to fly and basically use that airspace would be taken care of through the flexible use of airspace in the case of controlled airspace, or you know, or if it's a special rules area or uncontrolled, you would just use your protocols of broadcasting, etc. So from a safety perspective, that would be taken care of. It's really around the landowner and the privacy issue, and and safety, I guess. And then, you know, if it's an unmanaged estate, that's where you literally knock on doors. And we normally work with security companies to do that. But yeah, that's literally how individual it becomes.
So security companies is a great transition to this idea of counter UAS.
Yeah.
Once again, well, actually, you mentioned survey and mapping. Oh my gosh, Kim, you and I could talk for hours because,
We
in the
could.
United States, I mean, I'm a lawyer, right? So I don't want to give us a bad name, but I would call us a litigious society. And this idea of surveying versus mapping, and there's some lawsuits right now where drone service providers have been cited by professional organizations that are, surveying, organizations, saying that drone service providers are illegally conducting surveying, which is very, I mean, it's a profession. I mean, it's like the legal
Oh,
profession.
wow. Okay.
The barrier to entry is super high. And these folks are literally just taking pictures and handing them over to a bank or a company that hired them. And they're getting cited and things like this. So there's big lawsuits under our First Amendment of the Constitution. So very interesting that you mentioned that. But let's transition over to counter UAS because you do security. And that's, interestingly enough, in our country, just a very small handful of federal agencies that, no kidding, have the authority to, let's just say, mitigate the threat, possibly even detect it other than through the naked eye. It depends on what you're doing, radar or electronic warfare, spoofing, jamming, all these things.
Yeah.
So how are there rules on counter UAS in South Africa or anywhere else in Africa that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. And I've chatted a few times to Mike Monick of DroneSec. If you haven't connected with him, you definitely should. And so they invite me to speak on their, I think it's called the Global, the Drone Security Network summit that they have every year. And so every one of their speakers is always talking about counter drone. And then they invite me to talk about like drones for good, right? And they're always like, do you guys have any, counter drone kind of measures or policies? And do you see any threat to your drone operations? And I always go, no, we haven't seen it yet. And I hope that lasts until next time we talk. So honestly, no. The only counter drone kind of activity or interest that I've seen is from the aerodromes or the airports, because for them it's really around trying to keep drones out of their airspace for obvious reasons. But I don't think anyone has needed to think about it yet from the point of an active kind of cyber attack or kind of drones used in untoward ways. So, and from an Africa perspective, I don't think so either.
So me because, I mean, having been, in the military for as long as I was, obviously AFRICOM, there's a lot of drone activity. We're talking big drones and some of what's happening on the continent. Where drones are being employed on a military level. But to think that, I mean, no matter where you are in the world, there are clueless, careless, and criminals, criminal operators. And just a foot stomp that, so many people say it's the drone. No, it's the operator, right? We all know that. All right, man, so much to talk about. We are running low on time. I want to transition for a second. Let me see if I missed anything really huge. Oh, we started kind of going big and neck down to South Africa.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But kind of going back wide, just had Yves Morier on here last week from formerly of EASA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. And, obviously in the US, we have our federal government, the FAA. Europe has EASA, providing that high level governance. Is there some equivalent in Africa right now at the African Union level? And if not, like providing, again, that overarching high level policy guidance where every then state does has individual authority to do certain things? Or is it just state by state right now?
Yeah, good question. So, look, I know that the African Drone Forum is doing a lot to, to kind of try and review regulations and perhaps even think about, a uniform Pan-African drone, regulation. But as far as I know at this point, other than, kind of collecting information of what each country is doing, there really isn't anything that's overarching. So South Africa promulgated its drone regulations first, and then there were a few African countries that kind of copied and pasted, just in for lack of a better description. Then, of course, we started getting some really cool stuff happening in some of the African countries around, like you already mentioned, Dawn with Zipline, etc. And so I think now there's real pressure for South Africa to catch up. And I think everyone's kind of doing their own thing. I really do believe that. I think Kenya banned drones for a long time. They've now, I think recently, as recent as a month ago, maybe, I might be wrong on that, approved its first ROC. And I think, if you go into the different SACAA websites, oftentimes you'll see the same kind of regulations and basic rules. Zimbabwe, for example, they've promulgated their regulations, but they haven't really rolled it out yet to actually have a structured ROC, industry, if you like, or commercial industry. So, I'm not aware of anything that's been formed other than, efforts from, the likes of the, African Drone Forum, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'm putting my glasses on because I'm old and I want to read something. So Denise, she was on Clubhouse last week, and she is a consultant for the World Bank Group that I believe leads the African Drone Forum or sponsors it. Yeah. If you guys haven't heard of the African Drone Forum, it's a multi-stakeholder engagement platform for drone tech and services that meet the needs of emerging African market opportunities. And so I wanted to mention that there's a couple of activities they're doing besides their big event they put on every year. In fact, February, 2020 was their first of its kind event in Africa, where they were showcasing all of this technology in a live format. It was pretty amazing. She said the African Drone Forum folks are getting ready to publish a number of knowledge pieces, including, take notes, everybody, a systemic review of UAS regulations and rules in African Union member states. So that'll be a big compendium of all these different state rules, which is a review of all 55 African Union UAS regulations. So there's 55 on the books right now. A primer on unmanned traffic management services. And lastly, an African Drone Forum playbook for enabling civil drone services. And they're also working on a roadmap for harmonization of regulations. So I wanted to throw that out there because I love to give people like practical resources. Kim, you mentioned, you can go into any country's civil aviation authority website and find their individual rules, but it looks like ADF is putting together a compilation that will be handy for everyone. I also want to do a quick shout out and kind of point to a couple comments and questions here. My shout out is to David Guerin. David, I met him years ago at the International Conference on UAS. He's working closely with Denise on these regulations, and I know he's kind of put up his own money to create a pretty amazing website that tracks global drone regulations. So I got to find that, and I will put it in my article that I'm going to be writing for Drone Life about this stuff. Let me ask you this, Kim. Glenn Lynch from Volatus in Canada, one of our guests a couple weeks ago, asked, does the SACAA provide guidance material for operations manuals, SMS, or other things that they require?
Yeah, good question. So the easiest way to think about it being guidance is our SACAA website has part 101 put out, basically. And our operations manual is essentially an expanded version. So there are like 5 parts to the part 101, and every part is then expanded in our manual. And the manual then basically explains how we are going to do what we're going to do within those regs. So it's not really guidance material. It's just basically, if you speak to each of the parts within part 101, you're essentially going to get there. SMS, well, our SMS policy and part in our ops manual is pretty intense, and we definitely had to kind of come up with that. But again, it speaks to part 101. So I wouldn't call it a guidance material, but that's basically what we followed.
All right, thank you so much for that. And lots of people in the chat today, so it's been super active. So thank you, everybody. We had Mark talking about, when we were mentioning counter drone and some of the concerns, correctional facilities or
agree,
anti-drone, especially with contraband delivery of materials by drone. Desi Eckstein is out there, kind of a regular.
Hi, Desi.
She said, congratulations on passing your audit this year, Kim.
Thank you.
Just to cut, we're getting really close to the wire here. Super quick, remote ID, that's a thing in the United States, just passed the rule. Europe has their own version of it. Europe's going more network, and they're moving ahead with UTM, and we're a little bit behind them, I would say. That's my personal opinion. Remote ID, is that even a discussion in Africa or South Africa right now?
Yeah, it is. So basically, and I'm aware of time, but essentially we're in a certification model at the moment. What we're aiming for as a country is a categorization model where, the one person drone operator who wants to go and do some wedding photography or whatever can operate without all this regulatory rigmarole. But in order to enable that, we do need drone ID, we need UTM, we need enforcement. And so all of that has to come in, and all of these things are being worked on in parallel. So drone ID has to come in, but it's not just going to come in on its own, because it won't aid anything really unless there's enforcement, and unless it's basically going to enable our categorization model, which will open up our drone economy. And there are very clever people working on this, including Sonette and a few folks from COASA and the SACAA. So that's a whole topic. Another topic, and I know you had it on Clubhouse the other day.
I know, we could talk for hours, and in fact I dialed out of Clubhouse in our hour because I had to go, but I think they stayed behind and kept talking because there was just so much to talk about. So really appreciate that. It was pretty amazing. Okay, we literally have 2 minutes left, and I know there's so much more to talk about in SACAM, but let's end with Women in Drones Africa, because that is something you're involved in. I like I said, I had the pleasure of being on your Fireside Chat podcast. Louise Jeff wasn't there that time, but just the women that dialed in, and the story I heard, Mufi, I believe her name was, her story, and she's got her child next to her, and she's talking about how she started a drone school in the middle of nowhere. They had no water. I mean, just these stories are absolutely incredible, and you are helping to inspire them. And I'm so proud of you and the work that you and Sharon and Louise and others are doing to bring women STEM opportunities throughout the continent, including South Africa. Can you give us just the 30-second elevator speech on Women in Drones Africa and how people can plug into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dawn. Yeah, so that's all down to Sharon and Louise for sure. I've kind of linked into that. But essentially, the idea really is to have expanded that platform from the US, and it was really around networking, connecting, learning, inspiring. And in the first instance, even though the idea is to have people join Women in Drones as members, the first thing we've been able to do is have these weekly chats where people dial in. It's super chilled, high energy. When I say high energy, it's about people just really want to share. And the key takeaway here, and to encourage people to join those weekly chats, is really around every chat I've been on, some action has taken place. Someone's made a new connection that's helped them do something else. Martha, for example, as you mentioned, we've connected her to some places and people that are helping her with her work. And so I think first and foremost, some of those women who are sitting in Africa may be in some of those countries doing things on their own. It's a lonely entrepreneurial journey. And for them just to become part of one community is just, it's goosebump stuff. So
I have to tell you, it is. I mean, I have them right now because I was on your podcast and I hung up and I went for a walk with my dogs and my husband. And I said, I was just on a Zoom call with women from Africa and the amazing things they're doing there. I mean, that was just crazy to me. And just again, so personally inspirational. And I'm hoping we got a couple of Women to Watch nominations out of my talk. I'm
you
crossing
did.
my fingers. Good.
100% confirmed you did.
And, people think like, oh, I have to be from like, Europe or, Japan or, or the United States to be worthy of this award or owning a big company or doing. It's like, no, like you can make a difference, a huge difference in your sphere of influence and really change lives. And so really exciting. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for this time. We've kind of hit our limit here. So
thank you.
Before we dial out, I just want to encourage everybody, if you haven't joined my Patreon, I'm going to ask you why, because it's pretty amazing. I have to say, I have not only these podcasts, but I'm going to hang up here and then Kim and I are going to do some bonus footage where we talk about her life wisdom. And all of my speakers have given us some golden nuggets. Like if you have a business or just for a life, great stuff. And I have a blog up there too, where I'm talking about these topics, but also national security and leadership with drones and advanced air mobility, etc. Speaking of women, just a real quick plug as well, the Canadian Advanced Air Mobility Consortium, I believe they're called. They're having a big event this Thursday. Sharon is a keynote speaker for her own fireside chat on Thursday. So check that out on LinkedIn. I will be moderating a panel on careers in AAM. And so would love to see you there. Next week, we've got South American drone regulations, and Daniel Conde from the Ibero-American Drone Conference is going to be with us. For everybody, again, on Clubhouse this Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, dial into Clubhouse because Daniel will be on and we'll start the conversation Thursday and we'll continue it next Monday on this podcast. So that's it for now. Thank you again, Kim. It was such an honor and a privilege to have you on here. Thanks everybody that was out there.
Thanks
for your
having me.
Comments and your participation. And we will see you again soon out here. Have a great week.